So Mises has a small section here about literature, which I thought was actually quite interesting, saying that later on he'll explain why he thinks that the common man only buys kind of frivolous fiction instead of great works of literature. But just before that, he says that those authors who merely repeat what everybody approves and wants to hear are of no importance. The author is by necessity anti-authoritarian and anti-governmental, irreconcilably opposed to the immense majority of his contemporaries. He is precisely the author whose books are the greater part of the public does not buy. So what he's saying is that literature is not conformism, but dissent, great works of literature. But what he later on says is that he mentions Marx and Nietzsche. Those people later became famous, but not when they were alive. There's no way that anyone, pretty much in the last, like I was saying in the previous audio clip, no one in the last maybe since the 19th century could have lived based on their royalties on their books. Very, very rare for that to have happened. Most people had other positions, or they worked for a king or whatever it might be. And of course, if you did, you really couldn't be a dissenter, or you'd have to be like Voltaire and have to flee France every now and then. But of course, those people sold a lot more books later. And so Marx and Nietzsche and Voltaire and people like that sell far more books now than they ever did when they were alive, and probably ever did since I don't know what the cap would be, but probably the last 50 years they've sold far more books than they ever would have sold. And why is that? Because they were dissenters. And what he says later on is that on the next page, he says that many critics take pleasure in blaming capitalism for what they call the decay of literature. Perhaps they should rather inculpate their own inability to sift the chaff from the wheat. So he's saying it's not the fault of capitalism that the common man does not appreciate uncommon books, but rather the fault of the authors. And it seems like it should be even easier to be a successful, great author like a Nietzsche or like a Marx or a Plato or whatever it might be, because there's a lot more people today and a much freer atmosphere to write and a much freer market in which to actually engage in writing and make any money and actually live on that. Just like I was saying in the previous audio clip, that all the bloggers and writers and media all should be very thankful of capitalism, or they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing. There's just no way that the civilization would be wealthy enough to support writers or magazine writers or etc. But the reason for this explosion of cheap romantic novels, I think they're called Harlequin novels, but there's also like the Daniel Steele and the kind of trashy romance novels, and even like Harry Potter and things like that, which I don't think are terrible, but they're certainly not high class literature. He's saying that people have always bought those things, but it should be even easier to be a great author today when there's a freer market and a freer free speech, and you're not stuck with some king and have to please him. And there's enough wealth going around in the market to actually sustain such an occupation. So it's not as if it's not the fault of capitalism that there's trashy novels. It should be even easier today to be a great author. And of course, we can also add what the internet has done. So it's not as if you have to go through a publisher now. It used to be that, of course, only few printing presses around, and to be published, you had to at least appeal to a publisher that you were going to make any money on it. But now people can create all kinds of content, just like I'm doing right now, that I don't expect to make any money on, but I'm doing it because mostly for me, but also because I think some other people might benefit. There's all kinds of publishing of material now that don't require a very narrow stream through a publisher or through a university or whatever it might be. And hopefully not in the future we have to go through some kind of regulatory board, but hey, that's already kind of happening with regulation. Like Twitter's already regulating various speech, and Facebook I know has been doing it. So there's already people who are kind of intervening on that freedom. But even it should be even easier to publish today because the internet is still largely free and unregulated, and you're able to make your own blog and talk about whatever you want. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to talk about, and you don't have to please some publisher or some academic publisher or Facebook or Twitter, some other narrow you can, just having a website, you can talk about whatever you want. So it should be even easier